Let's go Dolphins! I'm about to reveal a side of the Dolphins situation that no one in the mainstream media is talking about. The truth is explosive, and after hearing what's really going on, you'll never see this team the same way again. I've connected the dots, from the front office to the locker room, and even to the owner's hidden agenda, and what I discovered is jaw-dropping. Before we begin, if you're a true Dolphins fan, the kind of fan who's a die-hard fan of this team, no matter how painful, click like right now. And let me hear your thoughts in the comments. Type "Let's go Dolphins." My heart bleeds water and orange if you've experienced the ups and downs of this franchise like I have. Believe me, what I'm about to say will spark a serious debate. Now let's get into it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This franchise is spiraling out of control. There's no turning it around when you're starting the season 1-6 for the second year in a row. And don't let anyone, especially owner Stephen Ross or the national media, try to convince you otherwise. The Dolphins already blew the easy part of the schedule. Games against the Browns, Panthers, Chargers, and even the Patriots were chances to rack up wins, and we barely scraped by or flat out embarrassed ourselves. What's coming up? The Falcons, Ravens, Bills again, and a trip to Madrid to face Washington. These aren't just tough matchups, they're games that could define the future of this franchise. And speaking of the future, let's talk about Mike McDaniel. Reports are saying Ross still believes in him. Give me a break. The man went from being a run game coordinator to a head coach in the blink of an eye. He was never ready for this. He's in over his head, and it shows every single week. Last week's disaster, losing 31-6, wasn't just another L. It was rock bottom. This team is undisciplined, unprepared, and getting worse. McDaniel admitted they weren't prepared for the Browns, and instead of fixing it, things continue to collapse. And then he cracks jokes in press conferences? This is not leadership. This is chaos disguised as genius. Then there's Tua Tagovailoa. This is not the guy. His inconsistencies, his inability to stay healthy, and now, reportedly losing part of the locker room after calling out teammates? It's the beginning of the end. And if you don't believe me, look at how McDaniel felt the need to publicly confirm that Tua would be the starter this week, as if that was even a question. That's not confidence. That's desperation. Here's what's really going on. Stephen Ross isn't firing McDaniel because he wants that number 1 overall pick. That's the truth. You don't fire your coach if you're trying to lose out and secure the top spot in the draft. Ross is no stranger to this kind of game. Let's not forget that back in 2009, he gave Tony Sparano an extension just before firing him. Extensions mean nothing to Ross, so don't buy the narrative that McDaniel and Greer are safe just because Ross likes them. It's a smokescreen. This tank is calculated. And the whispers about Tua's contract? Very real. There are ways the Dolphins can move him before or after June 1st and manipulate the cap to make a trade work. There's already talk of teams that might take him if the Dolphins eat part of the contract or convert money into bonuses. There's $54 million in cash involved, something only a billionaire like Ross can handle. But why would they do that? Because they've got their eyes on the 2026 draft, and more specifically, on a quarterback. The name floating around? Mendoza, a Miami native, a guy with potential to be the face of the franchise. And this time, Ross wants his guy. Forget Lamar Jackson, forget Tom Brady, forget Sean Payton, all of whom Ross reportedly wanted but Greer failed to deliver. This time, Ross might just take matters into his own hands. Let's keep it rolling, because what I'm about to dive into now is going to make it even clearer that the Miami Dolphins aren't just in disarray. They're actively preparing for a total organizational reset. And the evidence is all there. You just have to know where to look. Let's pick up with Tua Tagovailoa. The front office is playing a very delicate financial game with his contract. His current deal contains a potential cap hit north of $42 million if the Dolphins were to move on. But there's a window, especially post-June 1st, where that number becomes much more manageable, down to $11 million, possibly even less with the right financial maneuvering. It's complicated, yes, but here's the key, it's possible. And if the Dolphins do land the number 1 pick, there's no way they keep Tua around while trying to build around a new quarterback. It would be financial and strategic malpractice. That's why all signs point to a draft day trade, or even earlier if a desperate team comes calling. Teams like the Falcons, Vikings, or even the Patriots could be interested in a 1-year rental, especially if Tua shows he can still play at a decent level through the rest of the season. And that's why Ross is waiting. He knows firing McDaniel now could spark a temporary rally, a feel-good bump that wrecks their draft position. He doesn't want to finish 5-12 or 6-11. He wants 1-16. He wants the cleanest path possible to a new quarterback, and he's willing to tank an entire season to do it. And speaking of McDaniel, don't get it twisted. This man is done. The moment this season ends, he's out. The only reason he's still in charge is because Ross doesn't want to accidentally inject new life into this roster by promoting someone like Anthony Weaver or Darrell Bevell. Ross knows players would rally behind a tougher voice in the room. We saw it in the Dan Campbell era. We saw it when Flores took over. The risk is too great that the Dolphins would win games that no longer matter. So instead, Mcdaniel stays. And every week he's still here is another week that exposes his lack of leadership, his game management flaws, and his inability to develop consistency on offense. Let's be real, this team hasn't looked the same since that collapse against the Titans. And since then, it's been nothing but regression. The offensive line is a mess, the run game is inconsistent, and Tua has visibly lost confidence. The body language is off, the timing is off, the locker room cracks are starting to show. And if you've been a fan of this team long enough, you know what this looks like. We've seen this movie before. But here's where it gets really interesting. Greer, somehow still employed, has been using coaches as shields for years. First it was Adam Gase. Then it was Brian Flores. Now it's Mcdaniel. And all the while, Greer has kept his job by pushing the narrative that he's just getting what the coach wants. But fans aren't buying that anymore. The offensive line has been neglected for years. We are in the bottom third of the league in cap spending and draft capital used on offensive linemen since 2022. That's not an oversight. That's a dereliction of duty. Greer should have been fired yesterday. The only reason he's still here is because he's promised Ross that this tank will work, that they'll land the number 1 pick, offload Tua, and reset the cap. But even if that plan works, Greer has to go. You don't trust the guy who built this mess to clean it up. Now let's talk about that potential number 1 pick, because this is where it gets juicy. If the Dolphins do land that top spot, all eyes turn to Mendoza, a quarterback with the tools, the pedigree, and the Miami roots to capture the city's heart. A Cuban-American kid who grew up a Dolphins fan. That's a marketing dream. But this isn't about PR, it's about football. Mendoza's been climbing draft boards, and if he continues to dominate through the rest of the college season, the Dolphins would be insane not to take him. And let's be honest, if they don't get Mendoza, there are still options. Sellers, Sanders, and a few others will emerge during the draft cycle. But Mendoza fits the profile of what Ross has been chasing for years, a star quarterback to build around. He swung and missed on Brady. He whiffed on Lamar. He passed on Herbert. This time, Ross wants his guy. No more listening to Greer or head coaches. Ross wants full control, and he might just write the biggest check of his ownership to make it happen. So, what happens next? Expect trades. Expect names you thought were part of the core to be shopped. Chubb, Phillips, even Javon Holland could be on the block if the right offer comes in. This team is hitting the reset button, and hard. But there's a core they will protect. Guys like Tyreek Hill, maybe Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Waddle. They'll try to rebuild around the new QB while maintaining some explosive weapons on offense. What we're witnessing is the start of a massive franchise pivot. And if they play it right, the Dolphins could finally set the stage for sustained success. But that means letting go of the past. That means moving on from Tua, firing Mcdaniel, and finally putting an end to the Greer era. This offseason could be one of the most important in franchise history. A new quarterback, a new head coach, a new general manager, a new identity. But now I want to hear from you, Dolphins Nation. Do you think Ross is truly committed to this rebuild? Will he finally clean house and bring in the leadership this team desperately needs? Or are we about to go through another decade of false starts and failed promises? Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe for more exclusive Dolphins content, and don't miss the next video popping up on your screen right now. Go Dolphins! We deserve better.